In terms of the current security situation in Eastern DRC, armed groups have been multiplying for some time and new groups have been emerging. But more recently, there's been development that these groups have been forming new alliances, new coalitions together. It's all about coalitions at the moment, and 3 of them are particularly worth noting. Firstly, the National People's Coalition for the Sovereignty of Congo, or CNPSC, and this is a group that's largely an alliance of the Mai Mai Yakatumba and other smaller Mai Mai groups that is largely based in South Kivu and in Maniema provinces. Secondly, we have a coalition that's called the Coalition of Movements for Change, or CMC. This is a group that's largely based in North Kivu. And then thirdly, we have what's called the Movement of National Revolutionaries, or MNR. This coalition is most notable to mention because it's unclear, although the name has been widely propagated, to what extent the coalition actually really exists on the ground, and for example, what extent the local ethnic Nande Mai Mai groups really buy into this coalition that is so much talked about. Now, a lot of these groups claim that they have national political objectives, and particularly try to tie themselves into opposition to Congo's President Joseph Kabila, and recent delays to elections, and him remaining in office while these elections are delayed. However, most of these groups are still really motivated and driven by local considerations. Conflicts between local ethnic communities, conflicts over resources and lands in these areas in Eastern DRC, as opposed to the national political scene as a whole. However, even though these coalitions are forming, they're very difficult to hold together, and this usually comes down to 3 reasons. Firstly, most of these groups don't have the money or the resources to hold a disparate number of armed groups, lots of different fighters together over a long period of time. So while they can be proclaimed, they tend to break up as they go along. Secondly, it's very hard for them to establish a unified chain of command. Many different fighters and groups in these coalitions dislike and resent taking orders from other fighters and working with other groups. So again, over time, cooperation tends to break down. And thirdly, a factor that tends to diminish these groups is their varying relationships with the Congolese military, known as the FARDC. This is because the FARDC will at times find certain groups, armed groups or coalitions, to be useful to it, and it will essentially give them a free pass, allow them to engage locally in violence against other armed groups, against other communities in a way that suits the Congolese military. Over time, these interests change and different groups become threats, and this relationship with the Congolese military changes, so we might see them turning on groups that they have previously worked with in the past. And this again works to diminish groups and coalitions that, while they've established themselves, fall apart over time. Now, there have been 2 notable security incidents that are worth mentioning in the context of security in Eastern DRC over recent months. Firstly, is an attack that was carried out in September of last year, September of 2017. This was an attempt by the CNPSC forces to take the city of Uvira, which is a large city in South Kivu province. And actually these forces engaged in a coordinated attack with land forces approaching kind of from the southwest and the west by land, and also forces approaching by boat across Lake Tanganyika in an attempt to take the city. Now, this attack was repulsed by the FARDC and also MONUSCO forces, that is United Nations forces in Congo. But a key factor in preventing the city from falling was the fact that Mai Mai groups north of the city of Uvira didn't also join in on the attack. If they had done so, there is a much higher likelihood that they would have been able to encircle the city, encircle the Congolese military within it, and increase the likelihood the city itself would have fallen to this attack. So really the limited size and buy-in of the CNPSC coalition was key in the city not falling here. Second notable incident took place December of last year, December 2017, was an attack in North Kivu province. And this was in Semuliki, an attack on the MONUSCO base in that locality by Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF militants. This attack was the deadliest single incident that MONUSCO has faced in DRC, with 15 peacekeepers being killed. This again was a well-coordinated and multi-pronged attack that took place on the base. And it appears that the militants were focusing on the munitions and supply depots within the base and also on the communication centers. But they were particularly looking to steal weapons and equipment, which indicates that they are preparing for further and future attacks, which this will facilitate. Currently, a new rebellion spreading from Eastern DRC in a way that threatens the national government in Kinshasa is unlikely, and this is probably for 3 key reasons. Firstly, most of the armed groups and coalitions in eastern DRC lack the money and resources to expand outside their normal areas of operation in the Kivus and Maniema provinces, let alone to threaten the national government in Kinshasa. Secondly, and a key factor that causes the first one, is that the neighboring countries are really not looking to sponsor anti-government rebellions in eastern DRC. And this is really the most likely factor that could drive a new rebellion that would threaten the national government, the facilitation in terms of weapons, money, and logistical support for a new rebellion in eastern DRC. And thirdly, there have been recent military reversals by many of the armed groups at the hands of the Congolese military and MONUSCO. For example, we saw the assault on Uvira by the CNPSC coalition failing in September last year. However, some of these groups and coalitions are likely to rebuild themselves. For example, Mai Mai Yakatumba is likely to pull itself back together within a few months if its leadership isn't neutralized. But all of this, however, is making it unlikely that we'll see a big new rebellion that threatens the national government. However, a key risk of wider violence in eastern DRC is the recent conflict in Ituri province, which has seen dozens of deaths and over 100,000 people being displaced. Now, this is quite often portrayed as being a conflict between the Hema and Lendu communities in this province, but the reality is more complicated, most notably because these two communities, or members of them, actually continue to assist each other even during this conflict, and including assisting each other in escaping the ongoing violence. So while we do see conflict between these communities and militant groups claiming to represent them, we also continue to see cooperation between them. A key risk in terms of this violence spreading even further is the participation or impact by local Rwandaphone communities, many of whom fear that they are already going to be attacked and drawn into this conflict by suspected association with the Hema who live in the area. And really, if we see the Rwandaphone communities being drawn into this conflict, this risks expanding the violence not just inside Ituri province, but also into neighboring North Kivu province, and with the violence and flows of refugees drawing the attention of neighboring Uganda. Because a new armed rebellion that threatens Congo's national government is unlikely, there are two key implications of insecurity in eastern DRC for Congo's national politics and scheduled elections. Firstly, the risk of a significant reversal or defeat at the hands of anti-government militants for the FARDC, for the Congolese military. This would impact on the cohesion and unity nationwide of the Congolese military, which in many ways remains a coalition of former armed groups itself. And secondly, during the 2006 and 2011 elections in DRC, the Congolese government was able to essentially pay off armed groups in the east to allow the electoral process to continue and take place without their interference. And the Congolese government was able to replicate this during recent voter registration drives in the east. However, the political opposition in DRC is very much unprepared for elections that are scheduled in December of this year, but which may be delayed further. The opposition lacks the resources, the money, and the unity to really take on the government and the ruling coalition at these elections. And as a consequence, there is a real risk that the Congolese opposition will attempt to use militant groups in the east to disrupt the election process because they feel at a disadvantage, and this will impact on the ability of the government to hold these elections. Conversely, however, the opposition accuses the Congolese government of spreading insecurity, particularly in the east, in order to allow an excuse not to hold the elections themselves, to delay them, and to allow President Kabila to remain in office further. Overall, the eastern DRC will be an incredibly important area of the country to watch during the coming year for security, for elections, and the politics as a whole.